Okay, welcome back, everyone. Here we are in scenic Kamakura, where I live, in my house. Some of you have visited this house, and I hope now that COVID is getting less terrible, some of you will be able to come back and visit again. So welcome to our fourth installment of meetings with remarkable Buddhists, especially remarkable Japanese engaged Buddhists. And today's guest is Mika Edaki from the IUS, International Buddhist Network for Cooperation Network, which is featured in not the case studies part of our large book that's coming up, but in the post-war section of the book from the end of the war to 1998. The Buddhist NGO movement was a really important development in engaged Buddhism and in Buddhism in general in Japan. Started in the late 70s, early 80s as a response to the crisis going on in Vietnam and Cambodia, the Indochina War there. And it was also a response by a lot of grassroots Japanese Buddhists to try to revive what was seen as Japanese Buddhism after the war was, first of all, most religion after the war was not trusted by Japanese people because of its involvement in the war cause, which I write about in the book. So there was a strong kind of anti-religious sentiment in the 50s and 60s, and Japanese Buddhist groups didn't really do very much. I mean, there were a lot of new Buddhist groups that came up, but the traditional sects just kept sort of losing their role in society. And then this is a period when the term funeral Buddhism was created, Soshiki Bukkyo, where it was seen that Buddhist priests, all they do is perform funerals and they make money off of doing it. And then that soured people on Buddhism even more. So there were a number of grassroots Buddhist priests, and they were grown up in the 50s and 60s. They had become aware of the Vietnam War. They wanted to do something active, proactive. And so they started visiting refugee camps in Thailand, and they wanted to support what was going on. So they developed a lot of these Buddhist NGOs, mostly for overseas NGO support work, aid work. And IUS is one of the later ones to develop, and it was a little different in its style. But I have known Mika since, I don't know, 20 years now, yeah. A little more. Early 2000s I met you when you became the head of, or the director, the Jima Kyokucho.
No, I was just a staff.
You were just a staff. Now she's the director of IUS. So we've done a lot of work together in Japan and also overseas. She's come to numerous INEB meetings. We've worked, the two of us have worked together a lot on the Myanmar issue, trying to raise awareness in Japan on the problems in Myanmar, not just now, but this has sort of been the ongoing issue. So that's my short introduction. And so I'd like to just have a conversation with Mika on various things, and even as much as you'd like to share your own life, because you're kind of representative and also unique and interesting person. So you are not a Buddhist priest or priestess. You are a lay person like me. You're born in a Jodoshin Pure Land family. That's your tradition. When you were growing up, was it a very religious family?
Not really.
Mm-hmm.
Just but a regular, normal Japanese family in terms of the religion too.
So not so religious.
Not so religious. Just I was living with my grandma, so she. I don't know if it's a religious or not, but whenever we received any food from somebody else, the fruits or sweets or whatever, we have to place at the the altar first.
The Buddha altar in the home,
Yeah.
right?
Then we can eat.
Mm.
But that kind of custom or
Right.
yeah.
But you, so
Practically,
but you
yeah.
come from the countryside, you're from Shimane.
Right.
So those are more older traditional customs that are still a little bit more alive as opposed to Tokyo, where they're really, I mean, there are a lot of homes that don't even have Buddha altars in Tokyo.
Well, I think it's of course, I'm from Shimane Prefecture, which was considered to become a rural area in Japan. But I think because I was living with my grandma,
Right.
and also
Mm.
great grandma
Right.
when I was much younger.
Right.
Then they was kind of carry out, the kind of classical
Right. Right.
lifestyles,
Right.
and that influenced me probably. But
Right.
if I was living with just my parents,
Mm.
maybe we didn't carry out that kind of things either.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of that kind of story of people who were influenced by their grandmother, because the grandmother was the most sort of devout, and they always every morning pray in front of the Buddha altar and make an offering.
Yeah, that's right. Every day whenever she cooked the rice, then she had to first rice had to go to the Buddha. But now nobody does in my family.
Even you?
Oh no.
So sort of considering this is a pretty typical, not so strictly or strongly religious background. So how did you end up working in a Buddhist NGO? You have to work with Buddhist priests every day. Your boss is a Buddhist priest. You have to deal with Buddhist priests in the Buddhist world. It's a world that most Japanese don't really want to have anything to do with.
Right, but it's good. IUS is supporting other Japanese NGOs.
Right.
Right, and I used to be working in Thailand.
Right. Oh, you used to work in Thailand.
Different NGO. And then that NGO was receiving the fund from IUS.
Oh, I see.
Then when I was there, my bosses or some members of IUS, mainly board members, came to my site to see, the project.
Right.
Then that's the first contact.
I see.
Yeah, for me to get to know IUS, and they look kind of rich to me.
Well, they were rich back then. They were rich in the 90s, in the late 80s.
So I kind of, my contract will be expired within half year.
Right.
I had to go back to Japan. So if there was a good job,
right,
please let me know and things like that.
I see. So you were in Thailand and you were working in a Cambodian refugee camp.
Not a Cambodian refugee camp. Well, the refugee camp is already gone at the time. I was working in Ubon Ratchathani,
right,
for HIV/AIDS problem.
For HIV/AIDS problem. This is
late 90s.
Late 90s.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So the refugee camps are gone, but the HIV problem was huge. I see. So how did you get to Thailand?
Back then,
right.
I was studying at the University of Hawaii, the public health.
Oh, in public health.
Yeah.
I see.
And I had to do some internship with any organizations abroad. And I asked a friend of mine in Hawaii if she knew any good place that I can be intern.
Right.
And she was a member of that organization that I
interned at in Thailand.
In Thailand.
Okay.
And then later I became a staff.
So who did you meet? Who was your first contact in IUS? Shigeta-san?
Yeah, Shigeta-san, Okochi-san, Tomatsu-san, the others.
As usual,
Yeah.
suspects. Yeah, Reverend Shigeta was these are all Jodo Pure Land ministers. Reverend Shigeta ran IUS for a very long time until he passed away, what, 2 years ago?
2019, so
3 years ago,
3
yeah.
years.
Reverend Okochi will appear prominently in our book on alternative development, environment, and anti-nuclear activism. And Reverend Tomatsu will also appear in our book often in especially end-of-life care. So you were working with some of the important engaged Buddhists in that period who've become important leaders. So that's quite interesting, quite exciting. I want to go back to Shimane for a bit. We are in this book, especially there's a chapter on homelessness, poverty, and we start the chapter looking at the Japanese countryside, especially Akita. Very high rates of poverty, high rates of suicide, high rates of disconnection. And then we look at Shimane is on the Sea of Japan coast, right? Along with Akita's in the far north. Shimane is south of Kyoto on that coast. It's quite rural. I was doing a little research today. It's 40th out of 47 prefectures in income. In 2016, it would be considered one of the poorest regions of Japan. Were you, how aware were you of these issues growing up, of that, like, of these kinds of problems going on in your poverty, and especially like what I've seen is this kind of almost like the destruction of the rural economy. It had been probably Shimane, there's a lot of fishing industry, fisheries and agriculture, and then by the 1960s, late 60s, everyone was leaving. So was this something in your awareness when you were growing up, and did it drive you out? Why did you leave?
Because I was young.
You were young, but a good young Japanese woman should marry a good young Japanese man and start having babies and stay at home and be a rice farmer.
But there are several reasons why I left Shimane.
Right.
And I really didn't feel that, Shimane was poor, compared to other regions in Japan, because I really didn't know much about outside of Shimane.
Right.
So I couldn't either compare.
Right.
Either. But job opportunity is very less.
Right.
Less than the urban cities. And if I wanna get a decent job, either Kencho, for the prefecture,
right,
for the city,
right,
or like bank.
I see.
I can't even think about that.
You did want to work, for the system.
Right. Otherwise, well, many of my friends still there,
right,
but then working for prefecture,
bank. City bank, right,
and also they own their own business.
I see. I see. There's a nuclear reactor in Shimane, right? Near where you live?
Yeah, 9 kilometers away.
When was it built? 70s, 80s?
Well, quite early, like 1970 or 71 or something.
Wow, that's a very early one.
The first one.
Was there any concern growing up there about, like, or it was just like, oh, nuclear power plant, no problem, it's going to be fine, and it's giving us electricity and it's helping the community?
I was too little when it came out. So I really didn't know what was going on at that time.
Yeah, but you lived there until you were 18, so there was never any sense of any
Well,
problem with the
The
plant.
thing is,
Right.
the reactor is located 9 kilometers away from my home. But
9 kilometers.
Yeah, 9
So just to give
kilometers.
you a reference for people, in Fukushima, the mandatory evacuation zone is 20 kilometers or less. So if you had been in Fukushima, you would have definitely been evacuated. 9 kilometers.
That time, the reactor is located in Kashima town.
Right,
And then I live in Shimatsue city.
right, different city.
So to me, it was very far. I mean,
Right,
it's outside of Matsue.
right,
So I think most of us feel, well, there are the nuclear power plants,
mm.
but didn't feel like that close. It's located that close.
Well, did people in your area work at the power plant?
I guess, but
Right.
I don't know anybody who was working
Mhm.
there.
Mhm. Mhm. That's interesting. Yeah. I mean, I live, what was it? 3 Mile Island is located north of my home city of Baltimore, a large city.
Mm.
It's what, 3 Mile Island's like just north of the Pennsylvania border. I guess it's like an hour drive. So it's probably like 60 kilometers.
Mhm.
And when there was that accident there, I remember where I was like, I don't know, yeah, I was like 10 years old, and we were told to like store your water because who knows what's going to happen to the water supply.
Oh,
I mean, it never became anything too big, but it was definitely like when it happened, it became a concern that me as a 10-year-old was aware of it. So, interesting.
mm. Well, I knew there was a swimming pool.
There was a swimming pool,
Yeah, next to the reactor.
Right.
I mean, the facilities.
right?
I heard that they use the heat from
Right.
the facility and then heat up the water.
Was the swimming pool built by the nuclear power company? Like as a part of their like,
Yeah, condition.
yeah,
Subsidy.
subsidy, yeah. So, yeah. So a lot of these towns don't have much money, and then when they host a nuclear power plant, they get a lot of money, and then they build these beautiful local facilities, and then all the local people are like, isn't this wonderful? We have a nuclear power plant because now we have a
There are
swimming.
many facilities like the library and
Right.
like a music hall. And,
Right.
Yeah.
Were all built with the nuclear
Right.
power plant money. Yeah. Yeah. So, no, yeah. So it's not surprising that most people thought it was quite a perfectly fine thing.
Right. Because we don't, nobody told us that danger.
Right,
You know?
right. Nobody told you the danger. So let's see, where should we shift to? So that's kind of that covers a number of different points we've looked at. We've looked at your overseas work. We talked briefly about nuclear issue, the rural development. Your IUS is involved in a lot of different things. They do overseas aid support, but they also do work inside the country. And IUS has been around quite a long time at this point, like 40 years.
About
No,
30 years.
30 years, I'm sorry, 30 years. Which is longer than a lot of things that are going on now. I mean, for you, what are the critical problems in Japan right now that really need to be
right now
focused on, that are also especially of a concern for IUS? What is IUS concerned about?
For this year or?
Yeah, this year.
Well, this year, we'd like to focus on the non-violence issues.
Non-violence.
Yeah.
Non-violence in Japan?
Well, you know, the Ukraine's
Right.
issues.
Mm-hmm.
And well, like one of the projects that we've been working on is to, I don't know how to say, to build a better relationships among North Korea, South Korea, and Japan.
Okay, so the Korean issue, yes.
right? And we are part of the campaign
Mhm.
that exchange the drawings with the children among the children in North Korea and in South Korea and in Japan.
Mhm.
The purpose is, now those children, living nearby, not nearby, but in the same area, East Asia region.
Right.
But because of the political barriers,
Mhm.
then it's not possible for them to meet together.
Right.
So in the future, we are hoping that they can get together and meet in real.
Well,
destroy the-
not only are they not being able to meet together, they're probably from a young age being given a certain amount of propaganda on
Right.
why they shouldn't like each other.
Mm.
Right.
So anyway, now we are exchange of drawings and then exhibit together, all them together,
Mm.
and then kind of exchange a message
Right.
and things like that. And then now we are not be able to meet together, but in the future, we hope
Mhm.
we can really, in real,
Mm.
meet and then talk. We want to build a kind of peaceful society.
Mm.
That's the kind of hope
Mm.
of the project.
Mm.
But then, North Korea is one of the,
Right.
the enemy.
Right. The pariah state,
Right,
quote unquote.
right. So I don't know if so then Japanese government also try to kind of militarize Japan.
Right.
And then
Increasingly, it's
Right.
coming out really strongly in the
Right.
media recently.
And then especially after the Ukraine matters,
Right.
It's so difficult for us to believe to be not armed.
Right. Because Japan doesn't want to be taken over by China or something like
Right. And
like
Ukraine.
that Japan would ever become like the Ukraine.
Ukraine wasn't the
rather
part
absurd.
of the NATO,
Right.
and they, nobody could help them.
Right.
Well, of course, they are shipping lots of arms
Right.
and arms.
Right.
And now targeted by Russia. So to me, it's so easy for us to believe the power of the military or
Right.
the part of the military alliance.
Right.
So I don't know. The government might change the constitutions,
Right.
but things like that.
Yeah.
So we would like to rethink what the nonviolence means. to
Right.
us.
Right. And also think about what maybe alignment or non-alignment means. So one of the things that's looked at in the post-war chapter is there was a strong movement after the war in the 50s among intellectuals and also civil society that Japan should be not a non-aligned country, that this was against the existence of military bases, US military bases. And it's like, it's fine to make treaties with America, but we should include China and Russia in any treaties. So the non-aligned movement had become very strong in Indonesia, India, and there were people who was like, that's the post-war vision for Japan, is not just becoming part of the American military empire, but making itself as non-aligned. So it seems like that question is still an important question.
Yeah. So, but yeah. So同盟に入らないってことでしょ?
Yeah.
So in a way, 中立?
Yeah, the non-aligned standpoint, in the middle, standing in the middle, yeah, non-aligned.
But then we are already part of under the huge umbrella of
Right.
American military.
Right.
So, and I think there are I feel like a lot of people think it's their security.
Right.
For their security, that we should be under the American military umbrella.
Right.
In that case, like the national budget for the
Yeah,
military
the self-defense spending, yes.
will be increasing.
But if you're already have American military bases all over the country,
And Okinawa will be
why
surviving.
would you need to increase military spending? It's definitely different from the Ukraine. I mean, that Japan has the US,
Right.
the security treaty, where basically the
But
US
then-
promised that if Japan's ever attacked, that they'll
But Japan,
support them.
but I'm not sure, but it's easy for Japanese government to pass the new law or whatever,
Right.
to be able to spend more on
Right.
the military spend.
Right.
Or, to be able to restart the nuclear power plant, things like that.
Right.
They got so many excuses now.
Right. Right. Yeah, this was something we were talking with Reverend Okochi and Reverend Takemoto about this in a different meeting. And they're just like, yeah, the Ukraine situation, and then the problem with like not importing Russian oil is like giving the government a huge excuse to restart nuclear
Right.
energy because there's not enough oil and we
Right.
don't have enough energy. And yeah, I was walking through the subway yesterday in the center of town, and they had these new things they created for people who want to work. It's like a little work box.
Mm.
And you can go in and it's a little place to work. It has Wi-Fi and everything. And it has a huge air conditioner attached to it
Oh, okay.
because it's got to have air and everything. And I was like, yeah, we don't have enough energy because we're wasting a tremendous amount of energy, like having an air conditioner on in a potential work spot that might be used by somebody. And it's like, sometimes the calculation of we don't have enough energy seems like a very suspicious contention. So you've done this work with this project on Japan, Korea, North Korea. This is an IUS project. You're working with
Well,
other groups?
Yeah, we are working with other groups. There is a campaign called Korea Kodomo Campaign, the campaign for the children in Korea.
Mm-hmm.
And it started around 2000.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we've been part of the campaign
I see.
since it started.
Mm. So when you're connecting Japanese kids, school kids with this, where are these kids from? How do you connect them? I mean,
Well,
do you
that's
go
a
through the
diff-
school or?
But that's kind of difficult. Some Japanese children have joined too, but most of them are from the Korean schools.
I see. So they're Japanese Koreans. I see. So they already have a sense of,
Right.
right. Mm. That's an important bridge. That's an important bridge. I interviewed Nakamura Sensei, and his comments are actually at the end of this chapter, and he talked about the role of the other in our different societies, because a lot of our societies more or less are homogenous. Japan's very homogenous, but more and more there are people from mixed race backgrounds or they're immigrants. And he's like, these people are very important because they serve as a bridge with other countries, other communities. And if they're marginalized and pushed out and discriminated against, you lose that bridge. And then, yeah, then it's like easy for Japan to hate Korea and Korea to hate Japan and North Korea to hate South Korea. But if these people are an important part of society, then they form like a bridge with these different countries. So interesting. What else is IUS working on? What are you working on inside of Japan? You said you support NGOs inside Japan too.
Mainly the NGOs who work for the refugees and migrants and stuff.
Mhm.
And also, when, since last year, we supported the NGO, my organization that works with the Minamata Bill.
Okay, the Minamata disease, which was occurred in the late 60s. It was a classic.
50s.
What?
50s.
It was the 50s. Oh, it's a classic example of terrible environmental pollution from industrialization. And yeah, people have been like it was poisoning in the water system, right? I can't remember exactly.
Well,
Yeah.
水銀だからね。
Right, right. It was in the water system. And a lot of people got sick and
But water, like they, なんていうの、排水、discharging the polluted water,
right,
the factory
right. The factory was discharging polluted water.
to the sea.
Right. But so you're still working because that's a very old issue. So didn't it stop?
Of course, it stopped,
Right,
but then the affected people
right,
are still alive,
right,
and a lot of people are somehow a lot of people were recognized, officially acknowledged
right,
as the patient,
right,
because there's some regulations,
right, right,
the
right,
acknowledgement, and but also so much heavy discrimination
right.
against the patient. So a lot of people are still kind of closing their mouths. And
Why was there heavy discrimination against the patients?
because so their bodies
Right.
became disformed.
Disformed, yeah,
Yeah, the one is that reason.
Yeah.
And then also the children.
right,
If the pregnant women got poisoned,
right.
then the
Yeah, birth
children,
birth defects.
yeah, birth
I
defects,
see.
the children also got the same disease.
Hmm.
So I know enough reason for the people to.
You were discriminated against because they had deformities. Hmm. That seems to be an interesting. I mean, I'm sure it happens in a lot of countries, but it's been interesting to see in Japan. It's happened a lot with nuclear victims.
Right, similar.
Even though sometimes you might not be able to see any deformity at all. So that was a very, yeah, I was kind of shocked why, I don't know. Yeah, it was kind of an interesting problem. So what are you trying to do on this? What are you doing on this issue in IUS?
So now we have decided Minamata the program that we are our funding program,
Right,
is we call Machi no Hi, the city lights.
mm-hmm.
Means we want to cast the light,
Right,
the issues of people who are under the shadow.
right,
So we would like to, well, like you said, the Minamata
right,
is, a lot of people probably think that it's all settled.
right,
So
right.
all the issues and
Right.
then,
Mhm.
but still there are some people who are suffering,
Right,
and some people are trying to record the history of those patients,
right,
in order not to repeat the same accident.
right.
And so we would like to cast the
Right.
light. That's the reason.
Raise awareness about it,
So
right,
raise awareness, and then want more people to know
right.
those small issues, maybe small issues, but important.
Well, there are a lot of small issues like this. I mean, recently there's been a campaign to shed light on the young people in Fukushima who've gotten cancer.
Right, yeah.
And it's now been 10 years. And so maybe they started getting cancer at 10 and now they're in their 20s and, they like want to start careers. and they're either too sick or they're being discriminated against. So at a certain point, it's like, these are all separate issues, but then it's like, you start to, as we say, connect the dots, and you're like, well, this is why the development issue becomes so big, because there's been a development policy that seems to be harming people. You know, these people are all victims of a kind of industrial development paradigm that creates a lot of poisons and destroys the environment and then makes us sick. So then it makes you think about the whole, like, what kind of development policy is this? Where, you know, because a lot of people have very idealized views of Japan, especially in other parts of Asia. They're like, oh, Japan's clean and it's safe and it's efficient and we wish we were like Japan. And then they don't know about these things. And then they don't know that their own government is following the same, they're learning their policies from the Japanese government. And you're like, yeah, you're going to have the same problems. You can build a nuclear power plant just like we did, and then you'll have like Fukushima victims like we have, or, you know, and I think, you know, something like Thailand, you lived in Thailand, they have all sorts of industrial diseases now, high rates of cancer, because of their development policies. So you said you're raising funds. So my understanding, you raise a lot of your funds from Buddhist temples. You have a large network. That's kind of what IUS does. You have a network of temples and you appeal for funds. And how many temples in the IUS network?
It's hard to say. About 200.
200? And they're mostly Jodo Shin, Pure Land?
Well, Jodo Shu, the top.
Right.
The probably next Jodo Shinshu.
Right.
Also Nichiren, Soto, Shingon, Tendai, Rinzai. Yeah.
Rinzai. So it's an ecumenical organization.
Right.
Right. I see. So back in the 90s, yeah, those Buddhist temples are rich. They're not so rich anymore.
Right.
Is it getting harder and harder to raise money?
Difficult.
Very difficult. So what do you think is the future of your work?
Do you ask me that?
Yes, it's a very hard question. It's a very hard question.
Yeah, it's very difficult for us.
Right.
We are trying, but we have like we developed a 3 years plan.
Right.
But don't know what. I don't know what's going to happen after 3 years.
Yeah. No, I mean, this is a big issue. I mean, one of the things we've been looking towards in the last couple of years in INEB is social enterprise, which is just going out and trying to get money for funding organizations, donations. It's a lot of work and a lot of energy. And some people are actually quite critical. It's like, I remember a very interesting monk that's in our network. He is Chinese. He was working in solar technology, became the head of a big solar company in China, and then quit because he was tired of being a businessman and felt like his life was somewhat empty, and he became a monk. So now he's doing eco temple work in China. And I remember talking with him, and he's like, yeah, what do these NGOs do? They just waste money. Because they raise a lot of money and they use it, and then it's all gone. And from like a business standpoint, it's like, that's irresponsible. It's like you take money as investment and you use it and you create more capital or whatever, and then you can keep expanding your business. You don't just use it and deplete it. So it was like, yeah. So, and this is also talk about alternative developments, alternative capitalism. Can we make capitalism, is it possible to make it work in a positive way where it doesn't create greed, anger, delusion, that we're using a business model to make money? I mean, this is kind of like what this is what Terra Energy is doing,
Mhm.
So actually, you could tell us a little bit about that. That would be interesting. So Terra Energy appears in the end of our chapter on the nuclear issue and alternative energy and alternative development. It is a 4 Jodo Shin Pure Land priests created an energy company. And basically, a lot of energy companies now, they don't actually own power plants and create electricity, but it's this whole derivative world of buying and selling energy. So they buy energy, they try to buy as much clean energy as possible, stay away from dirty energy and nuclear energy. And then because especially for quite a long time in Japan, the government run energy companies were pricing system was rather stilted pricing system where people were getting overcharged and paying way too much for electricity, and then they would use all that profit for other development projects like building huge nuclear power plants. So these new energy companies are coming in and they find that they can undersell the old ones, still make a profit. And then, but they're using the profit not for becoming rich Buddhist priests, they're using their profit, they take the profit and they put it back in to various kinds of social projects, especially Buddhist-based social projects. So you have a relationship now with Terra Energy since when?
2 years ago.
2 years ago.
Mhm.
So
3 years ago.
they're donating some money to your work
Yeah.
from their profits.
Mhm.
I see.
We do buy energy from Terra Energy.
So you buy energy from them too. So that's good. So you're
I do too.
a conscious consumer.
I do too.
I need to. I haven't signed up for mine yet. I feel very. I need to walk the walk instead of just talk the talk here and change my energy companies. So that's a new source of income for you then?
Well, not much.
Not much,
Mm,
but hopefully they'll get bigger and they'll be
yeah,
able to.
right.
So what do they, when you started working with them, so they want their money used for a specific purpose or
No,
any purpose?
Any purpose.
Any purpose. So that's nice.
Mm.
So good networking.
No designation. Mm.
Great. A good example of increased networking in this country, I think, especially among Buddhist groups. That's kind of where I would like to ask another question about. Yeah, so one of the things that we've been working on is the problem in Myanmar.
Mhm.
In general, in Japan, political advocacy work is more difficult.
Yes.
So one of the things that you've been doing recently, which I think is I don't remember it happening so much in the past. I used is working with non-Buddhist NGOs like Friends of Earth to raise awareness and campaign against Japanese investment in Myanmar, both from the government and from corporates. So you have a not only awareness campaign, you're actually doing some social protest.
Yeah, we do.
So this has IU's done, I don't remember much work being done in this kind of, I mean, social, in divestment is like, I'm from the US, we've had divestment there was the divestment campaign from South Africa as against apartheid. But divestment campaigns against the Japanese government and Japanese corporations, are they that common, that popular? Seems like newer to me.
Well, the Friends of Earth,
Right.
the FOE, and also the Mekong Watch.
Right.
They are the main actors of this movement.
Mekong Watch is a Thai NGO, right?
No, that's Japanese.
That's Japanese that tends to work Mekong River in Thailand. Okay.
But then they work for the Burma too.
Right.
And they've been doing that kind of work for a long time.
I see.
Yeah, they go to and stakeholders.
Right, stockholder meetings and try to, yeah,
Yeah, and then
right,
start whatever.
protest in front of stockholder meetings.
For several issues, like mainly coal mining.
Coal mining.
Yeah.
Right,
Or for like Ukraine, for like a Sakhalin, the natural gas
right,
plant or whatever.
right,
So then we just happen to fund, but giving the support to Mekong Watch
right,
even before the coup.
right,
And for
In
the
Myanmar,
same,
right.
yeah, and the same issues. Then at that time, the main target one is Kirin Beer Corporation.
Kirin beer, yes, yeah,
That has the business with MHM in Myanmar.
right.
And then
And they've divested, haven't they?
they did, but they didn't withdraw. They haven't withdrawn yet.
Okay,
Yeah, they said they will stop. But
okay,
then withdrawals, it seems like there's a hectic process of withdrawal.
yeah,
So I guess they couldn't.
but
finish that
they've made a
process.
public commitment to
Right.
pulling out. That's pretty big.
And also the Y complex, which is a huge commercial infrastructure
Mm-hmm,
in Yangon.
mm-hmm,
But the land was rent from the military.
mm-hmm.
So the rent
Right, it's
is
going to the military.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm,
And that's what they were advocating
right,
even before the coup.
I see.
And the coup occurred.
Right,
And Alice was already supporting this project.
right, right,
their actions.
right.
So we kind of naturally became a part of the campaign.
Maybe, I guess, I think it's new because I don't see this happen much in the Buddhist world.
Probably, yeah, because so that was happening even before,
Right,
by like a Mekong Watch
Right.
or FOE Japan or other JAXES, or especially by environmental NGOs.
right,
But nothing than in Buddhist world.
right. So I don't want you to have to criticize your fellow Buddhist NGOs, but there are a number of other Buddhist NGOs. Are you the only one kind of doing this kind of work?
Maybe only eyes.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is a continual problem that appears in my book a lot. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, not the investment, but we'll be involved in the Palestinian issues
Right.
alone. So whenever the Israel bombed Gaza or West Bank or Lebanon, and it was natural for us to go to the Israel embassy.
Right.
Please stop.
Right.
So,
Uh-huh.
so for I.
But there's an important difference there, and I've noticed this in Japan,
Mm.
and it's not just Japan, but it's very easy to criticize other countries.
Oh,
So
okay.
there are a number.
I see.
There are a number of Buddhist
Mm.
groups in Japan that have been very anti-nuclear warfare.
Uh-huh.
So they criticize Russia, Soviet Union,
I
America,
see.
big conferences, a lot of money, and then they never talk about the nuclear issue inside of Japan and the fact that Japan has large stockpiles of plutonium that could be made into nuclear bombs and things like that. And so it's like,
That's true.
so going from criticizing somebody else's government to criticizing the Japanese government seems like a big jump.
I see.
So when this Myanmar work you're doing, you're criticizing the Japanese government and the Japanese corporations for their involvement in supporting
I
the
see.
military dictatorship. That means that's a big
I
change.
see. But it's true, it seems to me that the Japanese NGO, I guess, kind of stopped doing the advocacy or some actions against the other countries.
Right.
And then now, in past 10 years or so, we always do get to Japanese government. We sent a letter to Japanese government. That's
an important shift.
Yeah.
So in the last 10 years.
To me, I'm not
Right.
really clear about it.
There have always been some really hardcore leftist groups that have always criticized the Japanese
Yeah.
government. And like, I mean, even Reverend Okochi's interfaith anti-nuclear group, that was 1992. They've been very strong against the government for a long time, but they were always considered like almost like impossibly leftist, irrelevant, Marxist, like no one pays attention to them because they're screaming leftist Marxists. So, but this is more now mainstream kind of NGOs that are last 10 years. That's interesting. So, and this seems to be, I mean, I was introduced to Engage Buddhism in Thailand, and I worked for Sulak Shivaraksa, and while I was working for him, he had to go into exile because he had criticized the military government. So I'm pretty used to like engaged Buddhists standing up and criticizing their own government. I thought that was kind of common. And then I came here and it was like, boy, the Japanese Buddhists really don't want to talk about their own government. So it's been interesting to see. I'm not sure the shift is there, but I feel like the shift, like you said that shift started to happen in domestic NGOs here. And I'm wondering, Japanese Buddhists tend to follow the lead. I'm wondering, because this is a question I ask in many of my chapters, because you have like the suicide prevention movement. And so it's great to help people who are suicidal, but then at a certain point, you're like, the system is creating suicidal people. So when are we going to start criticizing the system? There are not that many priests involved in the suicide prevention movement who are like, what's going on with labor policy? What's going on with our economic policy that's pushing people to like this? Reverend Hakamata is one of them, one of the few ones. So that's interesting. So now IUS is starting to do like join some of this work being done by non-Buddhist groups, criticizing Japanese government, supporting the Burmese military government, which they've been doing for a lot longer than 10 years, more like 50 or 60 years.
So like at the Saffron Revolution.
That was 2000.
So you also, we went to the Burmese embassy. Do you remember that?
Yes, we protested in front of the Burmese embassy as a Buddhist group.
Right. And this time we didn't go to the Japanese embassy at all, Burmese embassy at all, because I don't see the point of me Japanese going to the Burmese embassy.
That's a good point.
By going to the.
And now you have a monthly protest in front of the Diet building.
Right.
The Prime Minister's office. It's all that one area. So that's a very good example. In 2007, we were protesting in front of the Myanmar embassy, and now in 2022, you're protesting in front of the Diet building in the Prime Minister office. Yeah, that's an important shift in awareness to starting to see where, not so much the source of the problem. The source of the problem is obviously the Burmese military, but how you can, I mean, how can you influence the Burmese military government through your own government's probably a better chance.
But also, if we criticize the Burmese military directly, then the issues for the PDF probably comes out. But I don't think we have any right to criticize the PDF, the People's Defense Force by NUG.
Oh, right.
Because that's their choice.
Right. Right. Yeah. That's interesting. So in this way, I mean, it's sort of more in a general way. What is your expectation or hope for the Japanese Buddhist community in the coming like 5 to 10 years? I mean, do you think, I mean, this is a kind of a larger question. You know, we talk about after the war, Japanese Buddhism just seems to be going down. It's become funeral Buddhism. People don't care about Buddhism. It seems like recently, is it coming back?
What do you mean by that? What do you mean by
going
money or
well, no, everything. I mean, it's just becoming increasingly irrelevant to people. People are becoming more secular. They have a bad image of Buddhist priests. The Bozo Maramoke, the priest just trying to make money from doing funerals. Negative image of priests, negative view of religion, not interested in religion. From a certain, from like an international standpoint, people look at Buddhist priests in Japan, they're like, oh, they're married and they drink and they smoke and they do whatever they want. And it's like, it's not even Buddhism anymore because you don't have monks anymore. So I feel like in the last 15 years, there's been a shift, certainly in social engagement among Buddhist priests. I see more social engagement, much more than I did 20 years ago. And I see this as a positive development for Japanese Buddhism and society. I mean, how do you feel recently? Are you encouraged by Japanese Buddhism, or do you remain pessimistic by it?
Both.
Because you've been abroad a lot, so you've been in Thailand, you've been Sri Lanka, you've been all these places, and you've seen what Buddhism is like in these other countries. So you said both. So tell me both. What's encouraging and what's discouraging?
Like the action in front of the Prime Minister's office for the Burmese issues.
Right.
The group always asks me if any religious person comes for the day.
Right.
And I ask, any Buddhist or Christian or who are interested in the issues. We already invited,
Right.
And they're very pleased to have the religious person to speak. And I think, for the activists, we always say, please stop, right?
Right.
Or please change your mind, or whatever. But for the priests, Christian priests or Buddhist priests, their speech always give us some different aspect of the issues. And this very kind of mentally relief. So if any action, I don't think they have to scream or whatever together. Just be together or just pray together.
Right.
That helps a lot of people to continue the actions and they believe what they are doing. Confirm, if where they are and things like that.
Yeah, I think, maybe their role isn't to scream. Their role is to, like, just as you said, I think one of the biggest problems in activism is burnout. And I think from my understanding of engaged Buddhism and engaged spirituality is it helps with burnout because it gives you a deeper sense of meaning. When people who are Buddhists who know the Bodhisattva vows, the Bodhisattva vows are impossible to realize. Sentient beings are numberless. I vow to liberate them. It's like they're numberless. You can never complete it. So the point isn't to complete. The point is to always be engaging. So there's something powerful in that kind of understanding. And I always think of like when we go out on a protest and there's Nippon Zami-Hoji monks, and they're never screaming.
Right.
They're just Namu Myoho. And so we go for like an hour, and the regular activists get tired of screaming and they stop. And these monks are still going Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. And it's like,
just 2 minutes of a praying.
Right.
That really helps us to move on, but also can make us realize the kind of boundary too, the limitation or whatever. We shouldn't cross some line, right? When we do make actions. We shouldn't be too violent.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is something I look at the end of this post-war chapter is I mean, the Buddhist path tells us the path to enlightenment is not linear and direct. It can be quite complicated, and it's not just instrumental. And so sometimes our activism gets stuck in the same paradigm as the thing we're fighting, which is like, we're just going to make these steps and move forward and change the system and be instrumental, and then everything's going to be okay because we're going to change it step by step. And it's like, it's a little more complicated than that. And we should have a sort of a wider understanding of how activism works, rather than just, we're going to scream and tear down the system and build a new one and it's going to be great. And it's like, yeah, that's been failing since the French Revolution, like 300 years ago. So let's be careful about that approach. So yeah, you have a Nippon Zen Mihoji monk working in your office a long time.
Right.
Right.
It's a secret.
It's a secret.
Yeah.
Why is it a secret?
That's what he says.
Oh, that's what he says. Well, everyone knows he's there. Well, so was that, you said you were encouraged and not encouraged?
Not encouraged.
So was that an encouraging point or a not encouraging point?
Encouraged point. that was that.
So at these protests, you've had some religious professionals come, some priests?
Usually.
Usually, a couple?
Well, a couple.
From the IUS network?
Well, like Okochi.
Right.
Sometimes Matsumoto. Matsumoto-san lives kind of far.
Very far away, right. Okochi's always
And also
there.
the Christian.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. So yeah, so your discouraging point or your discouraged point?
Discouraged point is but there are several.
There's several. We don't call it discouraged point. We say room for improvement.
Oh.
Points for improvement.
The one is, a lot of people are not interested in the overseas issues.
A lot of people in Buddhism.
Yeah, Buddhism.
I thought the Buddhist NGO movement was all about overseas issues.
Well, that was back in the 90s.
Oh, so it's changed. When did people got more like this?
Well, yeah. Well, the Japanese economy is also
going down. For the last 20 years, yeah.
And the younger generations, they want to, like you said, a lot of people in the younger generations,
right,
a lot of priests, I would say,
right,
probably trying to get involved in the social movement, the
right,
social actions,
right,
more than the before.
Right.
But I think most of them work for the domestic issues.
I see.
Not many
right,
looking at the international issues.
Right.
But our life nowadays is all connected.
Right, very much.
All kinds of lives around the world. But to me, of course, I'm not discouraging anything. I'm
right,
really respecting
right,
their works.
Right.
But then if they look 2 steps
more, right.
More, that would be more exciting to
right.
me.
I mean, I've heard this complaint in general about Japanese recently, that, the generation of the 80s and 90s were all like going abroad, trying to go to foreign university, trying to be international. And now the number of Japanese like going to overseas to study and that kind of thing has gone down severely. And so it's kind of funny because like when I was first in Japan, it was the height of the Buddhist NGO movement. And I was like, this is great that they're working on things, but nobody's working on anything in this country. It's all like, let's go help the Cambodians. And I thought, now it's kind of flipped. It's now like everyone's very focused domestically, which is, it's been incredible to see. But yeah, it'd be great to do both. I think, I mean, this is like my job in some ways. It's I'm an other from INEB, and I'm like trying to connect. So some people are like, oh, but I don't speak English well. And it's like, it's okay. Like, our network is filled mostly with non-native speakers, so you're fine. So, you know, we've been trying to do that with the suicide prevention priests. We're like, yeah, there are people in other countries that are interested in your work.
So for the suicide prevention work is very important, and I really respect what they do. But I don't know if they are looking at the system of the social system.
That's been my biggest problem with, I don't really call it a problem, but yeah, it's like, I think there've been a couple of people, I think Nemoto-san a little bit too, because they're just like, boy, the suicidal people aren't like becoming any less. They keep coming and coming, and we gotta stop them. And so, like, just being on the phone with them, I'm gonna lose my mind. So, like, let's get into a deeper systemic work. I'm a little bit hopeful, because I think this is a natural process of the Four Noble Truths. You start with like the immediate suffering, and the more you work on it, the more you start seeing into it, and more deeply you start seeing it. I'm wondering if this is also going to happen with like Hitosaji, which works like they're helping the homelessness on the street. And it's like, well, why are the homelessness on the street in the first place? And then it's like, well, now we're starting to look at labor policy. And it's like, okay, so the labor policy is a problem. Should we try to do an activity for labor policy or not? So, I mean, actually, Reverend Takemoto is a great example of this. Reverend Takemoto, when I met him, he's a suicide prevention priest. But he kind of was like, I'm burning out, and it's too much to run an NGO with no money, and I'm not getting at the root of the problem. And then one day we were in a meeting of like suicide prevention people, and he's like, oh yeah, I'm switching my work now. I'm going to go into alternative energy. And I was like, and I was like, have you met Reverend Okochi? And he's like, no. And I was like, oh, let me take you up and meet Reverend Okochi. And I was like, why did you switch to energy? And he's like, because I think I can get at the system better this way. And if I can create a society that's not disconnected and alienated through community development, then I'll make the number of people who are suicidal less. Nice. And that'll be a bigger way to work on this than dealing with each individual suicidal person one at a time. So yeah, I think it's coming.
Also, of course, if they are always, getting the soda from the suicide potential people,
right?
Of course, that's going to be too much for them, and I don't think they have enough, space to think about, international matters.
Right.
But then, there are other resources, like IUS is here,
right?
Other NGOs here,
right?
For the labor issues in some organizations in Japan here.
Right.
So, we can just connect.
Well, yeah, I think that's the point of our network, is to connect people, and there's that kind of idea is kind of emerging. I mean, the whole concept of a gatekeeper that's become very popular in even city halls and stuff, where like Reverend Fujio, who's a suicide prevention priest, is hired as a gatekeeper. And a gatekeeper is basically someone who refers someone who's having mental health problems. Like, why are you having it? Well, because I'm like went bankrupt and I have no money and I'm going to kill myself. And it's like, okay, well, we can find a financial expert to help you with that. So in the same way, our engaged Buddhist movement can be like, I don't know, somebody who's doing suicide prevention work is running into a lot of foreign laborers who are having mental health issues. And it's like, well, they're having labor policies and immigration policies, and maybe we can connected with IUS, who's doing a campaign on this, and because they're a little more political. Sometimes it's not about getting like, it's not necessarily like a priest may really be good at suicide prevention. So let him do that work, but let's connect him with people who are good at maybe doing political advocacy and then putting them together. It's kind of a system efficiency. So any other points? You said you had a number of points for points of recommendation.
Recommendation.
So a little bit more of an international perspective would be good. I think that would be good. You forget. That's pretty good.
Yeah. So please donate IUS.
Please donate to IUS, yes.
So we do the international matters.
Right, you do international, well, you're trying to link international matters with domestic matters, which I think is, like you said, this is really important. This is really important, this shift to like, see the, like, okay, you know, I saw this with Reverend Okochi's work. It was like, people in Cambodia and Thailand are suffering. Yes, we should help them, but why are they suffering? Well, it might be the development, military, economic policies of Europe, Japan, and the United States. And so maybe we need to work on those too, as we also help Cambodian refugees at the same time. Cool.
Oh, one more thing. I
Yes, one more thing you remember.
What, なんて言ってんのかな? Some of them really, not all, but some Buddhist priests.
Yeah.
And respect their traditions.
Yeah.
Too much.
Their sectarian tradition.
No,
Their shuha.
No, just Japanese. What they say, Japanese tradition.
Oh, I see.
And the perspectives towards gender stays very old.
So that's two things. Well, the first thing is pretty common in the Buddhist world, actually, because you go meet the Theravada monks and they think Mahayana is sort of impure Hinduized Buddhism. That's not. And then, yeah, Japanese Buddhist exceptionalism is left over from the Meiji era.
That's right. So, but I mean, Japanese tradition. So,
right.
It's one thing.
Yeah.
What I want to say is gender issues in Japanese Buddhist society.
Let's talk about that for a minute. I just want to hear that for a minute. So, yeah, I mean, they have very old perspective.
To me.
Right. Yeah, they seem to be behind mainstream society.
Right.
Which is a little depressing because in the, what is that annual poll that is done on like gender situation, it's in gender equality in social, political, economic, and political. And Japan's like 130th in the world, which is pretty depressing. And
the Davos conference.
Yeah, the Davos conference. And you're like, okay, so the Buddhist world is behind mainstream society, which is already behind. Buddhism's behind in gender and basically everywhere in the world. Not just Japanese Buddhism, as you know. What do you think can be done? Help.
I'm thinking.
I have an idea.
What?
There's great potential in the less monastic orders of Japanese Buddhism. So the Jodo and Jodo Shin. It's easier for a woman to become a priest, and it's easier for them to become the abbot. So because of the low birth rate in Japan, there's even temple families don't have a lot of kids. So there are a number of temples with one child, and it's a girl, and she grows up, and now she's becoming the abbot. So like in Jodo, Pure Land, which I worked in for many years, I know a number of female junior abbots who are becoming the abbot. So I think that's got to help the gender issue, that the abbot of the temple, more and more abbots are becoming women. Whereas before it was always the male abbot and
That's
the
true.
wife.
Yeah.
And now that's more difficult in the more monastic traditions like Soto and Rinzai. So that's one possibility.
That's true. It takes time.
No, changing quickly. Do you know any female abbots?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Some good examples too. But still, when Buddhist society in Japan also trying to achieve the SDGs.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
for gender.
There was a report yesterday I read in the newspaper, Japanese newspaper, that the latest SDG rating, Japan has actually gone down. Japan jumped on the SDG promotion everywhere the last 2 years, and their rating has actually gone down. And one of the main reasons is because gender is still not a good situation. So yeah, I'm wondering what.
Well, it's not Buddhist for the Buddhist matters, but なんていうの、選択制夫婦別姓 selective different surname. That's what you said.
I see. Yeah, the right to have a different surname for women. Yeah.
Oh, so that's very difficult. That would be a difficult issue among the Buddhist world.
Right. Because temple succession.
Right, and it says selective. Nobody said we have to. There's only way. That's a なんていうんだっけ、選択制。The selective なんていうの英語で selective right to
the right of choice, the right of choice.
Right of choice to
have a different surname. Right.
So right to have a choice.
Right.
It doesn't say that we have to have a different name, surname.
Right.
So it's up to you.
Right. It's just the right of choice.
The right of choice, right?
They're not supportive of.
Right.
Well, this is the whole. This is the whole. But this is such a specialized topic, and it's so interesting because, when I've been in international situations with Buddhism and gender issue, and it's mostly about in Theravada countries, it's the right to ordain, or the right of the status. But then in Japan, it is the right of the wife of the priest, who has a very mysterious, unclear set of rights in a lot of Buddhist denominations, especially the more conservative monastic ones, because they're not really supposed to have wives. So they kind of gave them a weird name. They're like temple family member. And so they don't have full rights. So then if they're able to, they don't have full rights in the first place. How are they going to have rights to change their name? It's even more crazy.
So the concept, right of choice.
Right.
Doesn't exist.
Right.
To me.
Right.
In Buddhist world. If I get married to priest.
Right.
Do I have a choice to
keep my name?
To work outside, or do I have a choice to do things like that?
Which is why a lot of priests end up marrying the daughters of priests who've been sort of trained in the system, because regular girls are don't want to enter that world. Regular women, I'm sorry, don't want to enter that world.
But in that case, now I guess a lot of people are married to outside of the temple, so that could be a hope. But I feel some kind of suffocated.
Suffocated. Yeah, some affirmative action would be good. I worked in the Jodo, the official research institute of the Jodo denomination. Wonderful place, wonderful people, super high level, respectful people. I worked there for so many years. There was nobody ever being inconsiderate or disrespectful, but it was a locker room, there were no women,
Oh.
literally. I think the first female Kenkyuan was an American woman brought in to help for translation. So there was like no topics, there were no gender issue topics for study, because one of the things about the Jodo Institute is like, we're not just studying old stuff. We want to bring the old stuff into connection with new stuff. So I was doing end of life care. There was a project on like, the whole project on like bioethics. So there were a lot of contemporary issues that they were trying to work with, but there were no women. And it just didn't even seem like anyone was even aware that there were no women. So that was like sort of the fundamental problem, is that there wasn't even an awareness that there were no women, or that the only women in the entire office were secretaries.
I see.
So, yeah, maybe, I don't know. Should we have like a international events where we should bring in the Taiwan Bhikkhunis. Those Bhikkhunis in Taiwan, they'll shake things up real quick. They're amazing. They're really amazing. Yeah, this is a good place to end the interview, because this is kind of where I end the book. That's kind of a missing chapter in my book, would be like the Buddhist women's movement. But I don't have enough material to write a chapter on it.
Oh.
I mean, I could write a chapter on it, but it would be a subspecialty chapter, and I'm not a specialist on gender. So the book reflects, the chapters, the case studies reflects major movements occurring in Japanese Buddhism on engaged Buddhism. End of life care, disaster relief, suicide prevention, even poverty, homelessness, and nuclear. They're major movements. We can see them happening. Like, I don't see much happening. It's hard to write something about something that's not happening. So yeah, I could write a separate chapter just on the lack of it happening, but I kind of felt like, well, that's a special, like, there are other people who actually write and work on this, like Kawahashi no Riko and other people like that. So it's not kind of my place. So I'm thinking of putting it at the end of the book and sort of afterward, like, why isn't this an issue?
I see.
Why isn't this an issue? This should be an issue. You know, if you were writing a book on engaged Buddhism in Taiwan, that would be the #1 chapter, is it the Bhikkhuni movement? It's huge. It might even be a chapter in Thailand, because since Ajahn Chatsuman ordained as Venerable Dhammananda, she was the first Bhikkhuni 16, 17 years ago. Now there are over 100, 200 Bhikkhuni in Thailand, and the Bhikkhuni movement is happening in Thailand. So obviously you have fully ordained nuns here, but they definitely seem to be off and just completely marginalized. So I don't know. The only interesting thing is that a lot of temples are run by the mothers of the habit. So that's a little secret kind of women's empowerment issue. I know a number of temples where the mothers are quite strong. So maybe that's it. Thank you, Mika. Great to talk to you. Great to see you.
Thank
you. We will see you at the next event for sure.
All right.
Okay, great.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Goodbye.